Heart anatomy overview. The heart is a vital organ responsible for pumping blood throughout the body, ensuring that oxygen and nutrients reach every cell and waste products are efficiently removed. It is a muscular, fist-sized organ located slightly to the left of the chest, protected by the rib cage. The heart works tirelessly to maintain life, beating approximately 100,000 times a day. In this tutorial, we will take a detailed look at its main anatomical features and blood vessels that form the centerpiece of the circulatory system. Before we begin, all diagrams featured in this overview can be found in our Heart Anatomy and Physiology Hyperlink Study Guide and our Heart Anatomy coloring pages and worksheets available in our digital store. Anatomy coloring pages are interactive and fun way to study anatomy. It improves recall and confidence in core concepts. Links are in the description. There, you will also find free digital downloads and study guides to help you master anatomy and physiology. Anatomical position. Before we look at the gross anatomy of the heart, let's look at its position. The human heart is located in the thoracic cavity, within the central compartment of the chest called the mediastinum. It is positioned behind the sternum and slightly to the left of the midline. Its inferior surface rests on the superior surface of the diaphragm. Its lateral borders are flanked by the left and right lungs. Its base is the broader superior portion, which consists of the upper chambers, while the pointed inferior end, directed antero-inferiorly and to the left, is called the apex. The apex is usually located at the fifth left intercostal space, at the left mid-clavicular line. The heart is enclosed within the pericardium, a double-walled sac that provides protection and lubrication. We will take a detailed look at the heart layers and pericardium in this tutorial. This is an anterior surface view of the heart. Let's look at its structures. This is the aorta and aortic arch with its branches. The brachiocephalic trunk, left common carotid artery, and left subclavian artery. Here's a detailed view. The first branch of the aortic arch is the brachiocephalic trunk. This artery is further divided into the right common carotid artery that irrigates the head and neck, and the right subclavian artery that irrigates the right arm and thoracic structures. The second branch, the left common carotid artery, also irrigates the head and neck. The third branch is the left subclavian artery. It irrigates the left arm and thoracic structures. The ligamentum arteriosum. This structure is a fibrous tissue that's a remnant of the ductus arteriosus, a blood vessel in the fetus that connects the pulmonary artery and the aorta. The ductus arteriosus closes at birth, giving rise to the ligamentum arteriosum seen here. The persistence of the ductus arteriosus is suggestive of a congenital heart disease. The left pulmonary veins and right pulmonary veins. Here is the right pulmonary artery. The superior vena cava, and below is the inferior vena cava. The pulmonary trunk arising from the right ventricle. This branches into the left pulmonary artery. The right pulmonary artery also comes from the pulmonary trunk. Here's the right coronary artery and right marginal artery. On the left of the heart is the left coronary artery and its branches. The circumflex artery and anterior interventricular artery, also known as the left anterior descending artery or LAD. Veins seen in the anterior view are the great cardiac vein and anterior cardiac veins. This is the left atrial appendage and the right atrial appendage. These are small muscular pouches that extend from the atria. Here are the lower chambers, the right and left ventricles. The most inferior part of the heart is called the apex. Here is a posterior surface view. We can see once again the aorta and its branches. On the posterior view, as observed, the aortic branches are inverted from left to right. First is the left subclavian artery, the left common carotid artery, and brachiocephalic trunk. The right and left pulmonary arteries. The right atrium. The left atrium. Left pulmonary and right pulmonary veins. Here is the superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava. Below is the coronary sinus. Here, all devitalized blood is collected from the cardiac tissue before emptying into the right atrium. Veins observed on the posterior surface include the left posterior ventricular vein and the middle cardiac vein. Here is the posterior interventricular artery, which supplies the posterior heart wall. On the inferior aspect of the heart are the left and right ventricles. And finally, here is the apex. Here's a longitudinal section. Let's look at the internal configuration of the major blood vessels, chambers, valves, and other structures, how they connect, and how they take blood to and from the heart. First up, the aorta and aortic arch. Can you name these three blood vessels? From left is the brachiocephalic trunk, the left common carotid artery, and left subclavian artery. Oxygenated blood from the left ventricle is transported to the systemic circulation via these vessels. The pulmonary trunk and its branches. The left and right pulmonary arteries. They take deoxygenated blood from the right ventricle to the lungs. The superior vena cava and inferior vena cava. These great vessels take deoxygenated blood from the upper and lower body to the right atrium. The left pulmonary veins. The right pulmonary veins are not observed in this diagram. The pulmonary veins take freshly oxygenated blood from the lungs to the left atrium. The chambers. The right atrium. The left atrium. The left ventricle. And the right ventricle. The heart valves. The valves include the tricuspid valve, pulmonary valve, bicuspid valve, and the aortic valve. We will take a detailed look at each valve later in this tutorial. Here, the structures seen attached to the valves are chordae tendineae, also known as the heartstrings. They are located in the ventricles and help to prevent atrioventricular valve regurgitation. They are attached to papillary muscles. As seen here, at the center separating the left and right heart is the interventricular septum. It has two parts, the upper membranous portion and the lower muscular portion. A detailed look at the histological features of the heart wall reveals several important layers, identifying each from the most internal to the most external layer. First is the endocardium. The myocardium. This is the muscular layer. The epicardium, also called the visceral or serous pericardium. This is the innermost surface of the pericardial sac and is formed by mesothelial cells. This is the pericardial cavity, which contains pericardial fluid produced by the mesothelial cells, the parietal pericardium, and the outermost protective fibrous pericardium. Both the visceral and parietal pericardium, along with its fibrous outer layer, is collectively called the pericardium. Here is the most inferior point, the apex. Here's a cross-sectional or axial view. To give a more intuitive perspective of the positioning of the valves, the axial view enables us to see them from a superior view. The most central valve here is the aortic valve. It has three leaflets or cusps, a left cusp, right cusp, and a posterior cusp. This valve prevents backflow of blood into the left ventricle during ventricular diastole or ventricular filling. Arising from the left of the aortic valve is the left coronary artery, and its two main branches, the left anterior descending artery or LAD. The LAD supplies the anterior and inferior aspect of the left ventricular myocardium. The other branch is the circumflex artery. It supplies the posterior and lateral aspect of the myocardium. Arising from the right side of the aortic valve is the right coronary artery. It branches into the conus artery, the right marginal artery, and the posterior interventricular artery, supplying blood to the anterior and posterior right of the myocardium. To the left is the bicuspid valve. As its name suggests, it has two cusps, an anterior cusp and a posterior cusp. It prevents regurgitation of blood to the left atrium during ventricular systole. The most anterior valve is called the pulmonary valve. It has three cusps, anterior, left, and right cusps. They prevent backflow of blood into the right ventricle during ventricular diastole. To the right is the fourth valve, the tricuspid valve. As its name suggests, it is composed of three cusps, a right cusp, left cusp, and a posterior cusp. This valve functions to prevent backflow to the right atrium during ventricular systole. Watch this easy tutorial on screen to learn exactly how blood flows through the heart and the cardiac cycle. Let's look at the electrical conduction system. The longitudinal section through the heart allows us to visualize the distribution of each component that make up the conduction system and how its structure relates to function. First is the sinoatrial node, or SA node, also known as the pacemaker. It is made up of specialized cardiomyocytes located in the posterior wall of the right atrium. The SA node generates an electrical impulse that causes the atria to contract. Bachmann's bundle. This is a branch of the anterior nodal tract situated on the inner wall of the left atrium. The three main tracts of the right atrium, the anterior, middle, and posterior internodal tracts. These tracts pass through the right atrium, connecting the SA node to the AV node. This is the atrioventricular node, or AV node, located on the posterior-inferior wall of the interatrial septum. The AV node delays the electrical impulse to allow the ventricles to fill. The bundle of is located in the interventricular septum. It rapidly transmits electrical impulses from the atrioventricular node to the ventricles. It further divides into the left and right branch bundles. And finally, the Purkinje fibers, which are dispersed at the base of the heart and throughout the ventricular myocardium, ensuring the ventricular contraction occurs. Take a look at this animation showing the direction and flow of electrical impulses from the AV node to the Purkinje fibers. Now let's look at the coronary circulation. The heart's main function is to pump nutrient oxygen-rich blood throughout the body, but how does the heart get its own vital supply? The myocardium gets its supply via the coronary system of arteries. Here is the aorta. Emerging from the root of the aorta is the right coronary artery. As shown earlier, this artery further divides into the conus artery, the right marginal artery, and the posterior interventricular artery. The right coronary artery supplies the right anterior and posterior aspect of the myocardium. To the left of the aorta emerges the left coronary artery. It branches into the circumflex artery and the anterior interventricular artery, also called the LAD. Here is an animation of the direction of blood flow from within the heart to supply the different territories of the myocardium. Venous drainage. The heart has a series of veins that drain the myocardial tissue, which allow for the removal of waste and the subsequent replenishment of revitalized blood. Here is the great cardiac vein. Its tributaries are from the left atrium, left and right ventricles, and left marginal vein. The small cardiac vein, this vein drains blood from the right ventricle. Middle cardiac vein, this vein starts at the apex of the heart and passes posteriorly to drain into the coronary sinus. And finally, we have the coronary sinus. This is the largest vein in the heart, and it is responsible for draining most of the deoxygenated blood leaving the myocardial tissue into the right atrium. This is an animation that shows the direction of blood flow through the main vessels that drain the myocardium. Question: what's another name for the aortic and pulmonary valves? Let us know in the comments. Get all the diagrams featured in this video with our heart anatomy coloring book and coloring pages. Skyrocket your knowledge of anatomy and improve recall by incorporating coloring into your study strategy. The digital version is also available on our storefront. Check the description or the link in bio. To see more videos like this, please subscribe, like, and share. It will help us to make more videos. Thanks for watching.